Wouldn't you like to try the coffee I brewed just for you, sweetheart? My husband, Daniel, asked with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I sat at my sister-in-law Emily's polished dining table in her Knoxville home, where we met for our monthly family brunch. The coffee cup in front of me gave off an odd, almost metallic scent that twisted my stomach. My name's Laura, and at 29, I never thought I'd find myself wondering if my own husband was trying to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage and too many accidental bouts of food poisoning, I'd learned to stay on guard, especially around Emily. She had a knack for setting up situations that left me sick or embarrassed, always with that same innocent grin Daniel wore now. "How sweet of you," I said, forcing a smile as my mind raced. The smell rising from the cup wasn't like any coffee I'd encountered before. It reminded me of last month when I landed in urgent care after drinking tea at Emily's place. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, and Emily swore she'd made the tea the same way she always did. She watched me closely from across the table, stirring her own untouched coffee absently. "Daniel's been honing his barista skills," Emily said with a smirk. "He's been experimenting with new brewing techniques just for you." The way she stressed "for you" sent a shiver down my spine. I'd noticed Daniel spending more time at Emily's lately, saying they were planning a surprise for our anniversary. But something felt wrong, the hush talks that stopped when I walked in, the odd text I'd glimpsed on his phone, and now this coffee with its strange smell. I lifted the cup, pretending to sip while watching their faces. Daniel and Emily shared a quick look that solidified my suspicions. Feigning a glance at my phone, I stood abruptly. "Oh, look at that. I've got a work call. Emily, mind if I use your office?" As I passed her spot, I stumbled on purpose, swapping our coffee cups in the chaos of catching myself. "Sorry," I exclaimed, straightening up. "I'm so clumsy sometimes." Emily waved it off with a stiff smile. "Just don't break anything in there." I nodded and hurried off, heart pounding. From the office doorway, I could still see them. Now I'd wait and watch. Peering out, I saw Emily lift the coffee to her lips, and my stomach tightened. Part of me wanted to stop her, but I needed the truth. I'd spent too many nights in ERs, too many hours doubled over in pain, always after eating with them. It hadn't always been like this. When I met Daniel at a friend's wedding in Knoxville 3 years ago, he was charming and attentive. Emily seemed warm, inviting me to family events and helping with our wedding. But looking back, the signs were there. Her accidental spills on my dress at big occasions, the extra seasoning on my food when she cooked. It started small, an upset stomach, a mild reaction. Daniel always had an excuse. Maybe it was something you ate earlier, or you're probably getting sick. But the pattern grew obvious. The worst was 2 months ago when I ended up in the hospital after breakfast at their place. Doctors found something odd in my system they couldn't name. But Daniel convinced everyone it was expired meds I'd taken. I gripped the doorframe as Emily took another sip. Daniel typed on his phone, unbothered. My untouched cup sat cold where I'd left it, its metallic smell still in my nose. Then I noticed Emily's hand tremble as she set the cup down, her face paling. "Daniel," she said, voice shaky, "something's wrong." Daniel looked up, confusion shifting to horror as he realized which cup she'd drunk from. He leapt up, knocking over his chair. "Emily, what's happening?" Her hands shook harder now. I feel," she tried to stand but stumbled, clutching the table. "What did you put in that coffee?" I stepped out, phone already recording. Daniel was beside her now, his face white. "That wasn't meant for your cup," he whispered, but the quiet room carried his words. Emily's eyes widened with fear and understanding. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, sliding to the floor. "Please. I can't." I dialed 911, hands steady despite the chaos. "Emergency services, we need an ambulance at 1738 Oakwood Lane. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious but shaking." As I spoke, Emily's gaze met mine, her usual icy confidence replaced by terror. "Laura," she rasped, "you switched, you knew." "Ma'am, the ambulance is en route," the dispatcher said. "Stay on the line." Daniel grew frantic. "Emily, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to, it wasn't meant." "Shut up, Daniel," Emily snapped through clenched teeth, anger briefly overriding her pain. "This is your fault. You said it'd just make her sick enough to miss the pitch next week. You swore it wouldn't be traced." My blood chilled. The pitch, where I'd present my proposal for a huge client account. the same one Emily had been chasing for months at our rival firms. It clicked. The tea last month, I said evenly. And the breakfast 2 months ago, those weren't accidents, were they? Emily's face twisted in pain. The tea was to keep you home for the Carter deal, but you went anyway. She gripped her stomach. Daniel said we just needed to make you look unreliable. Sirens wailed outside. Daniel backed away. Emily, stop talking. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She slurred. We've been at this for months, ever since Laura started outshining me at every meeting. You were supposed to make sure she drank it today. Paramedics rushed in, and I stepped aside as they loaded Emily onto a stretcher. I stopped recording, emailing the video to myself and my attorney. Daniel stood frozen as his plan unraveled. I'll go with her to the hospital, I told the paramedics firmly. I need to ensure she gets proper care. I met Daniel's panicked stare, and I'm sure the doctors will want to know what was in that coffee. At Knoxville Medical Center, the ER buzzed as doctors worked on Emily. I sat in the waiting room, replaying her confession on my phone, the tremor in her voice, the dread in her eyes. It was proof this wasn't just paranoia. Family of Emily Harper, a nurse called. I stood, noting Daniel's absence. He'd muttered about parking the car half an hour ago and hadn't returned. I'm her sister-in-law, I said, following the nurse. How is she? She's stable. But we found alarming toxin levels in her system, the nurse said gravely. The doctor needs to discuss some unusual blood work findings. Dr. Carter, a stern woman with silver streaks in her hair, waited by Emily's room. Mrs. Evans, what happened before she got sick? I took a breath and pulled out my phone. Listen to this first. I played the brunch recording, watching Dr. Carter's face shift from concern to shock. This is serious, she said, jotting notes. The substance we found isn't something that ends up in coffee by accident. It's deliberate. Just then, Daniel appeared down the hall, pale and sweaty, clearly overhearing. Laura, he started, stepping toward me, let me explain. Stay back, Dr. Carter warned, hitting the call button. Security to room 315, please. Daniel raised his hands. It's a misunderstanding. Emily was confused. She didn't mean, really. I pulled up texts I'd found on his phone last week. Forwarded to myself. So these messages about keeping me out of the game before the Grayson pitch were just friendly chat? His face went ashen. You went through my phone? After finding that weird vial in your desk, yes, I said. I turned to Dr. Carter. I've been hospitalized 3 times in 6 months with unexplained symptoms. Can you check if they match what's in Emily today? Her eyes narrowed. We'll run tests. Security will keep your husband here for questioning. 2 guards flanked Daniel as he sank into a chair, muttering, we were just helping you slow down. You were working too hard, taking all the big clients. Emily said if we made you take time off by poisoning me? My voice was steady despite my shaking hands. How long? Was it you at the holiday party too? His silence answered me. Detective Sullivan's coming, Dr. Carter said quietly. She'll need statements. Detective Sullivan arrived soon, a seasoned investigator of domestic cases. She listened to the recording and read the texts, her expression hardening. Mrs. Evans. You mentioned prior hospitalizations. Tell me more. I opened a log on my phone. First was February, after dinner at Emily's, stomach pain, dizziness. Then April, the tea. June, after breakfast with them. I kept my voice calm. Symptoms were similar but varied enough to stump doctors. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. You've been tracking this? I nodded. Pulling a second phone from my bag, I started carrying this for secret recordings. I've got several of them plotting, vague, but damning. In one, Emily said, the Grayson account's worth millions. Daniel, she'll ruin everything. Stick to the plan. A few sick days should do it. Daniel replied, I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it. Sullivan's face tightened. Through Emily's room window, I saw her awake, confidence gone. We're running tox screens, the detective said. Dr. Carter found unnatural substances. We'll need home samples too. Daniel's voice rose down the hall, arguing with guards. I need to talk to my wife. Laura, we were protecting you. That's not protection, Sullivan cut in. That's attempted murder. Emily tried to sit up as we entered her room, but tremors lingered. Toxicology shows a compound used in drug testing, not public access, Dr. Carter said. Emily paled. Impossible. Daniel said it was mild. Mild like Laura's symptoms? Sullivan pressed. Another detective entered with evidence bags. vials and notes from Daniel's desk at Harper Marketing. I felt faint. You documented it like an experiment? It wasn't that, Emily faltered. The first tries didn't work. You kept showing up. So you upped the dose, Sullivan said, eyeing the bottles. Did you know these could kill? Silence. The Grayson account, I said slowly. You needed me gone permanently because they wanted me as lead. Emily's face twisted. You were stealing everything I built. Daniel said he'd fix it. By killing me? The words hung heavy. We weren't, Emily began, but Dr. Carter interrupted. Today's dose was far higher than Laura's past samples. It could have been fatal. Sullivan turned to her officer. Warrants for their homes and offices. Trace these compounds. Emily slumped. Whispering, it wasn't supposed to go this far, Daniel said one more try. I stepped closer. Every sickness, every missed meeting you watched, took notes. What does that make you? Silence answered. Outside, Daniel was cuffed. Detective, I said, turning. I'm ready to give my statement. The trial spanned 3 weeks, feeling endless. I sat in court daily as the prosecution built an airtight case. Vials, notes, recordings, texts. Emily, once poised, shrank in her chair. Daniel avoided my gaze. Dr. Carter's testimony was brutal, showing their escalating doses and intent. A pharma rep confirmed Daniel stole the compounds via a college buddy. The defendants planned this systematically, the prosecutor argued. Not just sabotage, attempted murder. Guilty verdicts came, attempted murder, conspiracy. The judge was stern. Premeditated acts against family, over months, demand the maximum. I felt relief, not joy. As they were led away, their lives ruined by greed. A year later, I stood at the Knoxville Business Summit podium, keynoting. The Grayson account had snowballed into more big clients, making me a top exec. Success isn't just talent, I said. It's integrity, trust. Threats can come from those closest, but surviving them strengthens us. Afterward, a young woman asked how I stayed composed. I controlled what I could, gathered proof, trusted my gut, didn't let fear stop me. That night, the Grayson client renewed for 3 years. A paper mentioned Emily and Daniel's prison terms. I didn't read it. I worked on my next proposal instead. The best revenge wasn't payback, it was thriving despite them.